team is all about hard work, going out, working for everything that you want, and appreciating everything that you have.
Sup, dude? Big name prospects such as Zion and Wemby are cool and all, but there's something about undrafted dudes that really tickle my fancy. Because nobody picked them like a nerd on the playground, these guys are forced to go through fire and flames to make it to the league. Despite the odds being completely stacked against them, there have been a handful of dudes who've made a fool of the entire league for passing on them. The best example of this is the Fro, Ben Wallace. Big Ben stood close to 6'7" rather than his listed height of 6'9", weighing in at around 240 pounds. Although he was the size of a beefy small forward, the man was stronger than an ox. He's regularly in the conversation for strongest player of all time. This is thanks in part to him growing up as an all-state athlete in like every sport, including football. Auburn actually offered him a scholarship. They wanted him to play both sides of the ball, but since they wouldn't also put him on the basketball team, he declined. This was because he suffered a serious neck injury during his senior year of high school, so he decided to put all of his eggs in one basket: ball. Through his first 2 years of college, he put his strength on display, averaging 17 rebounds and nearly 7 blocks a night. He wasn't D1 or even D3. He was at a small JUCO in Cleveland. Thankfully though, because he was dogging the JUCO dude so hard, he got some eyes on him. For his junior and senior year, he played at D2 Virginia Union, which is where Charles Oakley played. Oakley was a massive reason Ben had gotten to where he was. They met when 15-year-old Ben attended one of his camps. At the camp, Ben played well, but at one point Oakley noticed him not paying attention, so he challenged him to a duel. They played a 1v1, and off rip, the oak tree busted Ben's lip and got a bucket. Then when Ben complained about it, he told him to stop being a punk. If you get called a punk, you gotta fight the dude, but Ben would have gotten his ass kicked, so he decided to just dish it right back, driving to the basket, smashing his body into Oakley's mouth because he wasn't no bitch. Charles Oakley took a liking to 15-year-old Ben. That sounded a little wrong. I meant in an Obi-Wan and Anakin way, not Chris Hansen. Their relationship got Ben to that JUCO in Cleveland, then when he dominated there, Oakley recruited him to Virginia Union. He's actually the only player Oakley ever recruited to his alma mater, and his strong belief in him paid off instantly. With the power invested in Ben's deed, the Panthers made it all the way to the Division II Final Four with a 28-3 record. They lost by 2 to Northern Kentucky, and then Ben went undrafted. Although he averaged 13 points, 10 boards, and showcased his outstanding defensive potential, not a single NBA team wanted to risk using a pick on him. This was for 3 reasons. He was a complete offensive liability, he wasn't D1, and he was vertically challenged for a big man. What teams didn't realize is his defensive ability made up for it all. Dealing with the pain of being passed on, Ben went to the gym and repped out until he couldn't anymore. Although, the pain he was feeling was only a small fraction of what he'd feel if his personal information was leaked on the dark web. The wonderful sponsor of today's video, Aura, can help prevent that nightmare. Aura scours the internet identifying all of your private information that's been made public, and they delete it. Not only do they do that, but they also protect you from malware, monitor your credit and phone number, making sure it's not being handed out to robocallers. Spam calls are annoying as hell, but since signing up for Aura, I haven't gotten one in so long. The fact that your personal information can be exposed on the internet is extremely scary. Anyone can go on one of those weird people finder sites, look up whoever, and find all sorts of private information, including your address. I'm always trying to stay safe, but it's hard when you have to spend hours scouring the internet, finding your information and deleting it. Getting all the online security features I need in one subscription has been so helpful. So dude, if you're concerned about your personal information being out there, Aura is definitely the app for you. Good thing they're hooking all my viewers up with a 2-week free trial. So jump on there, put your information in the vault, and see what pops up. I guarantee you it'll scare you. You can either let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information, or you could go to aura.com/NBAGoober and start your 2-week free trial today. Link is in the description, and big thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video. Alrighty, after going undrafted, he managed to get a tryout with the Celtics, but it didn't work out. Probably because they had him playing shooting guard. This led to Ben traveling to Europe, where he signed a contract with an Italian club. With them, he played in a single game, then got a call from legendary undersized big man Wes Unseld. He wanted Ben to come try out for the Bullets. They only had one spot open for another big, and Ben made sure he was that guy. He gave it everything he had, and it paid off after inking a 1-year, $250,000 contract. His rookie year, he rode the bench because the team was stacked with bigs. Chris Webber, George Murashon, or however you say his name, Harvey Grant, and Lorenzo Williams all played before him. This wasn't much of a surprise. He was an undrafted dude from a D2 school. That didn't stop him from working in practice though. The two best players on the team, Juwan Howard and Chris Webber, said they were extremely impressed by how hard he went at them. Over the course of the next 2 years, his relentless drive to outwork everyone resulted in an increase from 6 minutes a night to 27. This was thanks in part to Murashan suffering injuries that would eventually sadly end his NBA career. His increase in playing time was also accompanied with an increase in hair. He started growing his magnificent signature fro during his second year. This was because him, Darvin Ham, and Chris Webber made a bet on who could grow their hair the longest. Ben, of course, destroyed the competition, and Darvin Ham didn't stand a fucking chance. As I just mentioned, in year 3, Ben was getting 27 minutes a night. He had improved from scrub to Washington's best bench player. This was not because of his offensive game. He was a godlike offensive rebounder and dunker, but to quote Charles Oakley, if you left him in a gym overnight and told him he couldn't dunk, he'd have 6 points by the morning. Over the course of the entire 1998-99 season, he made just 2 shots outside the paint. And inside the paint, if it wasn't a dunk, he was likely to miss it, making just 43% of his layups. The icing on the cake was his free throw shooting. The dude was Stevie Wonder at the line, shooting at a horrendous 35% clip. A lot of guys were shooting better from 3 than he was at the line. Spoiler alert, this was consistent throughout his career. Who cares though? Offense is for fruitcakes. His game-altering, rock-solid D is what got him playing time. At just 24 years old, 3 years removed from going undrafted, he led the Wizards in like every defensive statistic. Per 100 possessions, he was pulling down nearly 17 rebounds. When he was on the court, they were a much better team than when he was not. He was locked in 100% of the time, leaving his blood, sweat, and more blood on the floor every night. His effort didn't lead to wins though. Washington had traded Webber and picked up an aging Mitch Richmond. He was a solid player, but the core 3 of him, Juwan Howard, and Rod Strickland produced just 18 wins in the shortened season. After such an embarrassing year, Washington looked to go in a new direction and traded Wallace to Orlando. The coach of the Magic at the time was Doc Rivers, who was extremely high on Wallace. He loved his toughness, and when he finally had him on his team, he found out he was tougher than he'd ever imagined. That season, Ben started 81 games, averaging 25 minutes a night. The wild part about that is he was injured the whole year. Doc Rivers said that he couldn't even practice. He was walking around in a boot until 25 minutes before games. Then as soon as he got on the floor, he'd grab 30 rebounds. There were only 2 guys Doc wanted to keep. Those 2 guys were Chucky Atkins and Ben Wallace. He felt they were so valuable to a team looking to compete for a championship. But the Magic front office didn't listen to Doc and traded them both to Detroit for Grant Hill. It was in the Motor City where Big Ben turned into a star. His minutes shot up to nearly 35 a night. In those minutes, he averaged a ridiculous 13 boards, over 2 block shots, and a steal. He had reached a whole new level and people were taking notice. He tied with David Robinson for 5th in Defensive Player of the Year voting and also got a vote for Most Improved Player. Yet still, his team sucked. Detroit won only 32 games and had one of the worst offenses in the league. This would get fixed the following season when the Pistons brought in new head coach Rick Carlisle. There wasn't much of a change other than that. Despite this, they finished with the opposite record of the year before, 50 wins and 32 losses. With Carlisle as their coach, the team's offensive rating went from 25th in the league to 12th, while their defensive rating stayed the same at 8th. At this point, Ben was the best defender in the league. He averaged a league-leading 3.5 blocks, nearly 2 steals, and an additional league-leading 13 rebounds. Scoring on him was even more impossible than finding the clip. His defensive dominance was recognized by being named to the All-NBA third team, coming in 2nd for Most Improved Player, and winning his first Defensive Player of the Year award. Winning Defensive Player of the Year became a very regular occurrence for him. He won a grand total of 4 over the course of 5 seasons. The one time he didn't win it in that span, he came in 2nd. That year was 2004, and he had arguably one of the greatest defensive seasons of all time. I'm not saying he deserved the award over Ron, but that season Ben was an irreplaceable part of the most unlikely NBA championship squad of all time. Back in 2004, I was fresh out the puss. I didn't even know what basketball was, but I've done my research. The 2003-4 Detroit Pistons were one of the most badass teams to step foot on the court. I mentioned Rick Carlisle earlier. Well, he was now out of the picture. In the offseason, Joe Dumars announced that they were signing Larry Brown to be their new head coach. Larry's philosophy was playing the game the right way, and he couldn't have had a more selfless finals team to teach it to. The Pistons were a very motley crew, a ragtag group of misfits who didn't fit anywhere else. Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Rasheed Wallace, Corliss Williamson, the Ham Sandwich, a few others, and of course, Ben Wallace. Larry had the team he saw in his wet dreams. Not a single one of these dudes had an ego. They played spectacular defense and each one bought into the team first mentality. Their chemistry was through the roof. They were basically the bad boys reincarnated with slightly less anger issues. Rasheed Wallace really tipped the scale in that department though. Back in 2001, he finished with 41 technical fouls. That's every other game he was getting teed up. His mouth may have cost the team a few points, but they needed him. The power of friendship propelled the Pistons to win 54 games. They put teams in a straitjacket, holding their opponents to just 84 points on a nightly basis. Their offense wasn't too shabby either. Everyone around Ben could get buckets, so his offensive shortcomings weren't too big of a problem. He was a terror on the offensive glass too, so that helped. The third-seeded Pistons didn't breeze their way to the finals, but they definitely impressed. In round 1, they made light work of Milwaukee. The Nets gave them a bit of a fight in round 2, but they took it in 7. Then they upset the 61-win Pacers in the conference finals. The score of Game 7 was 65-69. Nice. Defense was on their way to winning a championship. The one team that stood in their way was Los Angeles. This team was a juggernaut comprised of Bean and Diesel, the Glove, and the Kid Diddler. They were stacked and expected to wipe the floor with Detroit. While the Pistons were very talented, they were the biggest underdogs in NBA Finals history, especially with a vertically challenged center who weighed nearly 100 pounds less than Shaq. Everyone couldn't have been more wrong though. Ben was one of the few men who could guard the Diesel one-on-one. It was no easy task, but he held him to just under 27 points and 11 rebounds. That stat line makes it sound like he got cooked, but that was not the case at all. In Shaq's previous finals appearances, he was just on an otherworldly level of dominant. Against the Pacers and Nets in the finals, he was putting up 40 and like 15 rebounds. Ben was too strong and active for him to be able to dominate like that. With him fighting off the Ogre, Tayshaun giving Kobe nightmares, and the whole team working as one unit, they stunned the world. The Lakers were only able to win one game to the Pistons 4. In Game 3, LA only put up 68 points. Shaq scored 14 and Kobe had 11. That series was the greatest display of defense in finals history. David beat Goliath. This was the peak of Wallace's career. He was really good for the next couple years and the Pistons were still contending, but in 2006 he signed with Chicago. He was there for a little bit, then got traded to Cleveland for a couple years, then back to Detroit in 2009 where he would spend his final seasons as a Udonis Haslem type dude. Ben Wallace had a truly impressive career. Besides Rodman, he's like the only guy who can completely dominate without scoring a single point. While Big Ben is cool and all, how about John Wall doing the Dougie? He has some of the craziest highlights I've ever seen. Click here to watch the video I did on him. Thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed. Bye, dude.